Welcome back to Preparing for the Unexpected. Today we are talking with Sean Mallen about crisis communications. Sean, great first and second segment there. Lots of good information. Now I'd like to bring it all together. How do we go about documenting our plan, making sure it works, making sure we've got the right people involved, the right people talking to media? What are the kind of things that we need to do to make our plans really worthwhile and valid, that it would actually help us?
Well, you test them. You do crisis communication simulations, and these are things I do as well. I'm doing one in a few weeks with a major utility as well. So you test it in that kind of format where you create a situation. Okay, major power outage, for example, in a major city, and people have all lost power for likely to lose power for days. Okay, communications team. What's the first thing you do? First, second, and third thing you do? Who do you contact? What's the messaging? How do you get the message out? And then you test it in that way. And then a few minutes after they've gone through the first stage, you'll say, okay, it's 2 hours later, and now we've discovered that in fact some people are going to be without power not for 24 hours, but maybe 5 days. And now we've got the local political leadership holding news conferences. What are you doing to respond to that? How do you answer that? As well, and you take it on through that kind of scenario. Really crucial part as well, and this is part of my practice as well, is media training, because as I say to people, this will be the most challenging interviews that you'll ever face, and you don't want it to be the first time that you've ever faced this kind of situation. So you want to do some realistic simulations as well, and again, thinking about the tone, thinking about clear messaging that is in plain English, that's not using euphemisms, it's not trying to minimize things or not inadvertently raising things to a higher level than they actually are. How do you deal with challenging questions? How do you deal with a news conference where, if they still have news conferences, I guess they still do, where multiple reporters are barking questions at you? How do you deal with a reporter who might be obnoxious and have their facts wrong? Or, as I say now, the bigger threat is a reporter who might be inexperienced or ill-prepared, because, as we know, there are far fewer reporters than there used to be, and those that are left are overworked, maybe doing multiple stories in a day, might not know much about your story because there are fewer specialists now as well. And then we run them through, we give them realistic scenarios. And okay, you're doing an interview with a live interview with the CBC News Network on this issue of your power blackout, or this issue of this train crash or this plane crash. And it's time limited. Okay, you're going to have 5 minutes here. They're going to be barking really tough questions at you. Let's do it. And then we record it. And then we play it back. We say, what worked? What didn't work? And you talk about tactics such as bridging or pivoting. You know, there's a truism that media trainers teach people to simply ignore questions that they don't like and answer the questions you want to answer, which you see in politics all the time. I do occasionally media train politicians, and I advise them this never really looks good. Think about a good, credible answer and give it your best shot as a credible answer. And it will almost always work better than being evasive, because if you have a good interviewer, and I like to style myself as a good interviewer when I was a political reporter, they'll keep after you. They'll make you look bad. Answer the question. I always say, do your best to answer the question as credibly and truthfully as you can. You choose your words carefully. You give some thought in advance. Media training is all about preparation, about basically thinking about what you want to say and how you want to say it. So that's an essential element as well. So it's practice your crisis communications plans with real life simulations, and get your people media trained as well, so they know how to deal with this.
There was something that I always tell people during these tests too, because I've done a lot of tabletop tests with either IT teams or business continuity teams, and I say, it's okay to say I don't know, but follow that up with what you're going to do about it.
Yeah.
Right.
I have a slide that says it's okay to say I don't know. It's okay to say it's okay. It's okay to, if you lose your train of thought when you're speaking because you're under stress Just to simply say, let me just start that thought again. Or in a stressful interview, a live interview that's happening during a natural disaster, maybe a reporter asks a question because they're under stress as well, ask a question that doesn't make any sense. I've done that. And it's okay to simply say, I'm sorry, I don't quite understand your question. Could you rephrase it? Or could you ask it again? And you simply avoid speculation as well,
Mm.
as much as people want to speculate. And there's one that I stress as well is use your own words. Sometimes reporters, and again, I've done this as a reporter, if they think your answers are not quite quotable enough, they might try to put words into your mouth. And you try to avoid repeating back negatives. In other words, here's an example that I play, a video that I play. Some years ago, when Jean Chrétien was prime minister and George W. Bush was president of the United States, one of Chrétien's aides was overheard to call President Bush a moron. Now, sadly, it was never caught on video or audio, but it was heard, and it became a big story because Bush was coming to Ottawa for a visit. So at a news conference, Chrétien was asked about this. What about this aide who called the president a moron? And Chrétien, who was normally very adept with the news media, said, well, I don't think he's a moron at all. He's a good guy. But what do you think the headline was out of that story? Chrétien says Bush is not a moron. So you don't repeat back negative. So there's a whole series of interview tactics that we work through with people to try to deal with these most challenging of interviews.
Well, you've used the word challenge there a few times. It's got to be difficult, though, in the heat of the moment, to know what to say, depending on the situation, because you never know how things are going to unfold. A disaster or a crisis is simply that. It doesn't it doesn't adhere to anyone's rules. It'll unfold the way it unfolds. So how do you adapt to that kind of thing?
You do your best to anticipate what the most challenging questions might be. This is what happens, for example, in debate prep at the highest level at US presidential debates, but here as well, and anywhere in the world where someone's doing a televised debate. You try to think about what's the worst thing that the other person could say to me. And in the same way, what's the worst question that a reporter is going to ask me, and how am I going to answer that? In times of crisis, when you're working very quickly, you have to think through these pretty quickly. And again, you try to give your most credible answer. I didn't explain the concept of bridging. I'm just reminded now, or pivoting. The concept of bridging is to address the substance of the question briefly, but then bridge to what you really want to say. So, for example, um, someone addresses a someone addresses a municipal official who's dealing with a hurricane, saying, "Weren't you, doesn't this just people are really suffering? Why aren't you? It seems to me that you're just not on the job here. Why are you not working harder to deal with this?" So you don't want to say repeat the negative. Well, it's not that I'm not on the job. You say, "Well, I'm sorry, I just don't agree with the premise of the question," and then you bridge by saying, "Here's the reality. The reality is." We're working 24 hours a day. We're putting this number of people on the job. We're answering all the questions and on all the calls the best we can. This is a challenging situation, but we're doing the best we can. So and there are a whole variety of different ways of approaching that. And you'll see it used particularly in political interviews, but in crisis interviews as well. Answer the question, because if you don't, they'll ask it again, but then pivot to what you really want to say, bridge to what you really want to say.
Should you also work with other teams? Let's say you're on a crisis communications team because you've got IT disaster recovery teams, emergency management teams, business continuity teams, and some of the messaging that crisis communications has to disseminate to whoever their stakeholders are comes from those teams. So should you work with them, not in isolation? And how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, it's almost a rhetorical question. It's
Mm.
part of the plan. And the idea is you want to have consistent messaging. So the idea is that all those different elements of the operation are reporting into the central crisis communications team. And based on that, you and the team will craft the messaging to get out. These people, if it's a power blackout, the people getting the power back on, they're pretty busy. They don't have time to go out and do media interviews. So you as the spokesperson or the spokesperson who are preparing you get the best information from the teams restoring the power, or you get the best information from the teams at the site of the plane crash, and you get it out to someone's central location to say, okay, here's the best information we can have. Let's put it out in a consistent, clear fashion. So yeah, it's axiomatic that yeah, of course you deal with all these people, and your job is to pull together all the information, decide what's most important, make sure it's right, and then get it out. And also, it's what often works is what I work the way I work frequently is I'm brought in as an external consultant for the in-house team. The in-house team, communications team, knows their organization in and out, of course, because that's their job to know it. My job is to work with them to try to make best use of the information and knowledge they have to deal with the crisis at hand.
Yeah, the reason I asked that question is I've recently seen a couple with a client. They've done a few tabletops, but each one of those teams did it in isolation and just assumed everyone else. And so I thought, I want your opinion on that because they got to work together. They can't do it in isolation. It just won't work.
Yes, and that's what I'm working on a tabletop next month. Obviously, I can't tell you the client, but where that was a recent big issue where different parts of the organization were working in silos and information did not got to the heart of the organization and wasn't communicated quickly enough, and it led to some bad headlines. So yeah,
Mm.
it has to be part of the plan that the most essential information from the people on the front lines gets into the central area, the core crisis communications team, so that it can be so the public can be kept up to date.
Well, we've only got 3 minutes left. Would you like to take a couple of minutes and give us some final thoughts on crisis communications and maybe something we haven't touched on yet?
I think it's just repeating, and what I teach in media training as well. Sometimes repeat your core messages, even it's not necessarily new. So a few essential things to think about: prepare. Think about the worst things that could happen to your organization, and think about how you'd respond to them. Think about the words you'd use to describe these bad things. Also, you can be ready to get ahead of the story because, as we've said, with social media, the story gets spread at the speed of these things, right?
Yeah.
Instantly. You have to be part of the conversation at an early stage. You can't hide under your desk. There's a clip that I play, which I think is really telling from the early days of the pandemic. Michael Ryan of the World Health Organization, and I'm paraphrasing him now, saying that if you speed trumps everything, you can't wait to be exactly right in crisis management because it can just get out of control too quickly. You can't hide under your desk. You have to out to be part of the conversation and deal with things as quickly as you can. It may not be perfect, but with some preparation, at least you've at least thought about how you can set the proper tone as well. So be ready to respond quickly. Be ready to be part of the conversation. Be ready to call upon external help because sometimes uh, this involves asking yourself, your organization, tough questions. Do we have a problem here? And maybe the solution of that problem might be painful. It might be that somebody in a senior position has to resign as well, which is not an easy matter as well. And if you think about how this story is going to end, okay, something bad has happened. Is this going to end with us having to say, we're sorry? Do it right away. Or as quickly as you can. The analogies are, rip the Band-Aid off, lance the boil, whatever, because the longer you wait, the more damage is done and the more you're seen as not addressing this core challenge that you're facing. And practice it. And believe me, these organizations do. Organizations that have to be ready for crises, again, airlines, railways, utilities, municipalities, the oil companies, the list goes on. They all have to be ready to respond and respond quickly. Because, as Michael Ryan said, if you wait, you never win.
That's true. Yeah, it can get away from you and you can never get control back,
Yeah,
of your own message even. So, yeah. Sean, thank you so much for sharing your time and your experiences and your knowledge with us today. I really appreciate it.
pleasure speaking with you, Alex.
And everyone watching and listening, stay prepared, everybody. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.